Cash Allred is a seasoned venture capitalist who's currently drives innovation at Antler, a pre-seed fund focused on empowering founders at the beginning of their entrepreneurial journey. Before joining Antler, Cash honed in his skills at Sweater, where he gained valuable experience in identifying and nurturing promising early-stage startups. He has a passion. His passion lies in backing founders at day zero, when their ideas are just seeds waiting to bloom. Cash enjoys diving deep into nascent ventures, understanding their core values, and providing strategic guidance to help them blossom into impactful businesses. His expertise stems from his diverse background, which includes previous ventures in various industries, giving him a well-rounded perspective on the startup landscape. So without further ado, we're going to pass the mic over to Cash Allred. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Thanks for having me. So I am from Utah. I grew up in a little tiny town none of you have heard of. And as I studied technology in undergrad and started getting into startups and venture capital, I very much felt like an outsider when I started. So as I've been learning things over the last several years, it's been I always take the opportunity to share the things that are talked about when the entrepreneurs are not in the room. And so this is your chance to talk about those things. Some of the stuff we're going to be going over is pretty dense information. And so if you have a question of how this would apply to you or a concept, just raise your hand, and we have people running mics around for the recording, so you can ask that and we can address it. But these concepts do build on each other. So let's make sure we take the time to dig into it. But for me personally, I grew up on a farm. My dad was a coal miner, and we were entrepreneurial growing up. My grandpa would pick me up every morning during the summer, and we would go dig ditches for neighboring farmers. He would hire me out and take a cut off the top. Just kidding, he wouldn't do that. But I was selling lambs as a young kid to neighboring sheep herders, and knew that the feeling of paving your own path was something that really resonated with me. And then as all of you have felt, when you get in these ecosystems, you kind of get pulled along. So I've been in venture now for going on 7 years. Did some internships in undergrad, 3 years at an impact fund, 2.5 years at Sweater, which was a seed Series A fund, and now I'm at Antler. So I'm just going to introduce Antler a little bit. So Antler is actually the most active fund in the world as of last year. We just made our 1,000th investment in December. We're in close to 30 cities now globally. The premise behind Antler is there is a progression in this startup ecosystem that we've talked about. And Antler literally starts at day zero. That's when we start interacting with entrepreneurs and spending time with them to get them to that inflection point of where they're ready for a pre-seed round to make that pre-seed investment. How it works is as we've grown to these various locations, we very much prioritize that in-person component. When there's not a startup yet to evaluate, you have to spend time with the entrepreneurs one-on-one to make good investment decisions. You've probably heard the cliche on LinkedIn or VC Twitter, oh, you've got to back the teams. The teams are the only thing that matter. And then they play dating games with pitch decks to choose who to invest in. We at Antler looked at that, threw it out the window, and said, how do we scale a pre-seed fund to every local ecosystem across the world that maximizes for the face time we need to write a lot of investments. So this is how it works. Last year, we had 80,000 plus applications to our program. These are someone who either just quit their job or is thinking about quitting their job and ready to make a bet on their company, all the way through. They're in this kind of in-between stage of maybe the first 6 months of building their company. When they apply, they get an interview, and we, spend a couple hours talking to them on the phone across multiple team members to make sure that there's a good fit and they understand what they're getting into. And then we bring them to, in this case, Boulder. So Boulder is our closest location, and that's the office that I work under. From there, we brought 2,500 entrepreneurs into these residency programs. They just work out of our offices for 2 months. So we don't, in the U.S. fund, we don't charge for that. In fact, if you're relocating from here to there, we'll give you $2,500 to take the edge off of housing. And it's not programming. It is not a class. It's not an incubator or accelerator. It's really just go there and build what you're building. There will be 80 other entrepreneurs there that you build with. And about half of them are technical, half of them are more business, sales, go-to-market focused. And at the end of that, they pitch for investment. So we don't invest up front. We don't invest in all the companies. We'll invest in maybe 20, 25% of the companies that come out of that. But it gives the founders a flexibility to validate their idea, find a co-founder, get these core pieces in place before deciding if they even want to raise venture or sell shares of equity in their business. And it gives us the opportunity to get to know them. So we'll invest in the subset of those companies and then also do follow-on. As we think about the program, there's the phase 1 residency, which I talked about, and then after that, everyone goes back home, and we continue to work with those founders all the way through the seed stage, where we're making founder introductions and coaching them along that journey. So this is our expertise, day 0 through the seed stage, and this is where most of you listening are probably at. And we're going to talk through a lot of the nuances of what works and what doesn't, and what mistakes are made in this stage. And Antler has worked with now thousands of entrepreneurs that have gone through these residencies and worked through these same issues. So here's some profiles of people we recruit. We won't spend too much time here across a variety of industries. We're fairly industry agnostic. I do think these principles apply in any venture-backed context. Some of the nuance of like the exact milestones that we'll talk about are, some will be specific to SaaS or to biotechnology or whatever else, but generally what we talk about applies to everything. So let's talk about Venture Math 101. This is, Utah Tech Week is largely dominated by tech companies that want to raise venture capital money and play the higher stakes game of building a very high growth, large company. So this is different than any other form of entrepreneurship out there. So it's worth looking at the dynamics behind how venture capitalists look at making money and how that affects you when you step into that. So you've heard the term unicorn. The term unicorn was created to describe how large companies need to be in order for the venture model to even make sense. Most of the investments that a venture capital fund makes will go to zero. And so let's actually look at an example here. Let's pretend that we have a $100 million fund. It's not the biggest fund in the world, it's not the smallest fund in the world, but the math's pretty easy. So we have a $100 million fund. And they will, in this instance, they'll write a $1 million check into 50 companies and then reserve the other 50 million for follow-on investments like at later stages in the company. So, and they'll buy 10% of the company at that price. So let's say it's a seed round, they invest $1 million, they get 10% of your company, and now you're partnered. Half those companies are going to go to zero. So now, unless something drastically changes, the VC fund is going to lose money. To even just return the capital that they raised from their investors back to them, at least one company has to sell for $1 billion. There needs to be $1 billion worth of liquidity to get $100 million back. From there, you have 49 other chances for a company to hit $1 billion. And there will be some that don't quite hit $1 billion. Maybe they sell for something else. But this is what that looks like. The non-unicorn companies, while still great, don't move the needle enough to make that big of a difference in the general returns of the fund. So the game of the venture capitalist is to bet on big ideas, scalable companies. There's a very specific thing that they're looking for that can make this formula work. They're counting on the losses. And so when you are talking to VCs and you're like, but man, this is a great idea, and I feel it, just know that the standard that you're being compared to is different, and the incentives are different than just the founder making a lot of money and building a great company. They're playing a game where we have to swing for the fences every time, even if it means we have to swing more often. In Antler's case, we actually invest in 200 companies out of our next fund. So we're taking lots and lots and lots of bets to offset for the stage that we invest in. So, and again, if you have questions, just raise your hand and they'll walk around with the mic around what this means for you. But so here's some things you can do to gut check if you should even go talk to a VC. And if you haven't gotten to the point where you can answer these with confidence, I just wouldn't. And there's nothing wrong with building a company that you own and that you don't sell shares in, or even just raising capital from people who are not VCs and are not playing the unicorn hunting game. So one is bottoms-up market sizing. Pretty simple formula. How much do you charge your customers a year? How many customers are there in your target market? Let's say in the US. And you may not know that at day zero, but just, do some back of the envelope math and see if it's even feasible to have a market big enough to build $1 billion company in. What you read in the Wall Street Journal is not enough. I don't care if the market's growing. I don't care if it's like your competitors sell this amount of software. This is for your company. How much can you sell your product for to how many people? That's how you think through that math. It's actually a lot simpler to think through than a lot of people make it out to be. The next thing is, what's a reasonable expectation of a valuation multiple? So that's a lot of colloquial terms. So what that means is you have metrics of your company, revenue and profit, but that's actually not what you sell your company for. You will sell your company for some sort of price that is a multiple of revenue or EBITDA typically. And the gold standard for high multiples is B2B SaaS. You have high contract value, often recurring revenue. The good B2B SaaS companies have low churn, meaning they lose very few customers. One customer can pay you millions and millions of dollars over decades, right? And they often are priced at 10x multiples. Although that's changed, and it's been fluctuating in the last year, know that you probably won't sell your company for more than that. And if you can't sell for more than 10x, then that means you need to hit 100 million in revenue if you're a B2B SaaS company. If you're anything other than a B2B SaaS company, the odds are you have to hit 200 million, 300 million, 500 million in annual revenue to sell for $1 billion. And you have to do that in a time frame that is a decade, right? So those two things together is, okay, this is the kind of business I have, and this is the size of the market. Is this even remotely close to something that is a good fit for venture capital? Or am I putting myself in a partnership where we're not aligned in what we're going after? One, you'll waste a lot of time talking to investors that aren't interested in what you're doing while they're nice, right? Or not nice and talking to you about it. That's the first thing that I see founders skip, is just making sure that there's that fit. So if there's any questions on that, we'll take those. Otherwise, this is where we've determined that you're raising from a venture fund, and where the rubber meets the road in a strategy around long-term, how you get from day zero all the way to $1 billion valuation. And this is what I've started to call the venture staircase. Some call it the venture treadmill. And you'll sometimes hear like, oh, I raised venture money and now I have to go raise again. And it's like, there's this, they're thinking about the time where they just want to stop pushing the company so hard over so long, but there's true incentives on why that's the case. So let's compare, even in the tech context, like a bootstrapped software company versus a venture-backed one. A bootstrapped one, the playbook to create value is you invest some time and money, you make a little time and money, and you reinvest that money, and you start to build a flywheel. And you get that flywheel going faster and faster and faster over time, and it's just you pushing it. There's no one else there pushing it, it's just you as the founder, until eventually it's going fast and it's spinning off cash to you that you can take home and put in your pocket. You could also sell the flywheel to someone else who wants to keep pushing it. The venture playbook's different. You get all of this cash up front at different inflection points. And the value of your company doesn't grow linearly based off of your metrics in the early days. The value of your company jumps at certain moments of your journey. So right now I have an idea. It's worth 0. But the moment I go and I find someone, a world-class technical co-founder, and this co-founder and I, we go out and we get our first customer. Yesterday we had 0 customers. Today we have a customer. This company is now worth significantly more than it was yesterday. And there's in whatever industry or business you're building, there's various inflection points that relate to you. Often they're tied to something like team, validation, which I would call like earned secrets, whether it's what the product should do or how you find a customer. And these earned secrets are things that you can't Google. They are things that you paid for with blood, sweat, and tears and capital that you have bought and you own them. Product, revenue milestones. And so if you look at these stages, I kind of have under the title the average size rounds, like a pre-seed maybe $250,000 to $1 million, a seed round, the median's $3.2 million, and some of the inflection points that are associated with it, but there's going to be very specific ones that are tied to your business, and it's your job as the founder to group them properly. So knowing at what point you face unlocks and making sure that you're capitalizing the business properly so that you don't run out of money before you hit that next inflection point or you're dead, okay? And we'll talk more about that in a minute of when in this staircase you should be raising, but we're going to be building on this framework, and it's a different mindset than building a flywheel through early days. Yes, it turns into that down the line once you start getting real business metrics to go off of, but at the early days, you're underwritten by these inflection points and proof points. So things that can mean when an investor tells you that you're too early. You will hear this all the time. One is they don't believe you when they say you've hit a milestone. The evidence isn't convincing enough. So you may say that you've hit this first inflection point and you're ready for pre-seed capital, and they just don't believe you. And that's often the case. Another one would be a VC fund check size is determined by the size of the fund. And so it could be that they do like you, but you haven't progressed long enough for the valuation of the company to make sense for their check size. So it's very much just a math issue. And they're careful to not buy too much of your company too fast in the staircase. Otherwise, there's not enough equity left on your cap table to take more steps after them. Could be that they're preserving optionality. Maybe they don't believe that you're going to go and raise another one tomorrow, so why not just wait one more day and see what happens? They actually want you to get farther along on that staircase as possible for them to feel like it's de-risked to put that in. And so until you are able to make a strong case and create some urgency around that, they're just going to wait and see. There's a key assumption, team risk, or something else that they don't believe. And sometimes that you'll never change your mind. And you will find lots of investors like that, that just there's not an alignment with how you view the world and how they view the world. The last is you mess something up or you're moving too slow. This is very much something that happens. Yeah, back here. You can take it too late for certain investors. So typically an investor will sit at one of these stages as their core thesis. So the fund size will determine a certain check size, and they'll sit as like, oh, we do core seed. There are certain funds.
You'll just bump to the next stage then.
Often you will.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then earlier you said that B2B SaaS is kind of the gold standard for what is taken to, it can be viewed as a likely unicorn. Is that just because of the margins, or is it because of the market segment? What is it?
So it's a few things. The quality of revenue for B2B SaaS is often high margin, as you mentioned, but it's recurring revenue, high contract value. There's ways to upsell as you kind of grow your services to a particular customer. So there's dynamics about it that's very different than an e-commerce business, where you sell one product to one customer. Maybe they come back and buy another product, maybe they don't, and now you have to go find another customer. So just $1 worth of revenue for this B2B SaaS company is worth more than $1 worth of revenue for an e-commerce business. So the validation piece is different too. I mean, SaaS businesses are incredibly hard to build, but that was just more speaking to, if we're valuing a business as a multiple of revenue, how valuable is that revenue? How much am I willing to pay for that $1 of revenue at that startup? I mean, there depends on the underlying technology and their fees, but they tend to be much higher margin. Tech in general is much higher margin than anything that's like physical product based, most as a general rule. But great question. So we're going to talk about this point 5. How in this day 0 to pre-seed stage, founders make mistakes and mistakes that you should be avoiding. So let's start with the team and the cap table. We're going to go into some pretty deep detail here, and it may seem like common sense starting with the answer, but you'll find that people have worked through this and wish they had known several of these things. Here's a really valuable chart that I've shared several times over the last year. And it's how much equity you should be giving different bands of people who are joining your startup. So what people do is they blur the lines between these, or they're not setting expectations properly with these people as they're joining their startup. And so with a co-founder, you need to have a co-founder with enough equity that they stick around. Why? Because we're asking them to not just make it a job, it's their life. They're dedicating, an indefinite amount of time moving forward into the future to this company, and they need enough skin in the game to be there. And VCs will often see, oh, yeah, you say you have a co-founder, but the co-founder has 3% of the company. That's not a co-founder, right? As we kind of move to the right, I have strategic hires and early hires, and I distinguish between the two because a strategic hire is someone who has enough experience and expertise that they probably could be a co-founder if they were willing to take that same leap of faith that your co-founder would. But maybe they're not. Maybe they do want a higher salary. Maybe they're going to wait until you raise that round of funding until they join the team. So that there's other elements where they're just not taking on the same level of commitment and risk, but they're that caliber and quality of person that you want on your team that you're willing to go to bat for. And they'll have, low single-digit equity. These are your hired CTOs and your CROs and your head of sales or your founding engineers. And you want them to be incentivized to come because you don't have a lot of cash yet to hire them. So like they're taking a pay cut to come, and you want to do that. But you want to be careful to not give away too much of your company yet for these kinds of roles, because it can cause problems in space for other employees and how expectations are met with other co-founders. So that's something to keep in mind. An early hire, these are a special breed of individual as well. Maybe they're the first 10 employees at your company, or maybe they're the third employee at your company, but they don't have that seasoned experience that would justify paying them a lot of money and equity to attract them from whatever other opportunity they have. I was one of these, and I got 0.5% in the startup. And that does not feel like a lot when I say it, right? But that is, when we look at cap table over all of these steps in the venture process, that is how much you can justify giving some of these early hires without starting to create really messy cap tables, et cetera. So the commitment from these people is less. I was at that company almost 3 years. look, I got less than 0.5%, almost 3 years, and I was regulated to the option pool, which means I actually had to buy my own shares in the company. So the difference between being a co-founder and starting the company yourself versus getting stock options is, as a founder, you are vesting those shares, but they're not options typically, like they're yours. So then advisor, founders are giving a lot of equity away too soon in their startups. And I've also seen some advisors call themselves co-founders just because they were there from the beginning, but they're not there full time. If I sound frustrated or annoyed, it's just because I feel bad that there's instances where founders are taken advantage of, or they want so badly someone to believe in them that when they find someone that seems to have what it takes to get them to the next level, they're willing to give away everything for it. And it causes problems down the line. So this is something I actually get a lot of questions about. So if people do have questions specific to you that we could talk about, I'd be happy to. But with advisors, another instance I run into is you'll have one founder that goes full time and they're recruiting someone else, and so they are to be their co-founder, and the other co-founder is not full time yet. So what do? The answer is you don't give them their equity till they go full time and they actually get into that founder track, right? You can work together, you can experiment, and any good entrepreneur with their sauce, worth their sauce, will be willing to go out on a limb and work with you for a while to test things out before they start. Until they're ready to make it formal on their side, the company can't make it formal on their side. And then everyone vests across all of these, even your advisors. Yes. Here, microphone, if you wouldn't mind.
Microphone, awesome. At the very beginning, let's just say there's two people for the co-founder, 50-50. How does the progression work? Do you set aside 25% to go to the strategic, or do you just, anyways, how do you see that working typically?
Yeah, so startups will issue more shares. So it's 50-50, so you issue more shares that dilutes you equally, and you create an option pool. Yep. And sometimes you'll bring in your strategic at the same time as your co-founders. Or sometimes you will, the order isn't always co-founder first, then this person, then this person. The rule is just keep people in their lane and manage expectations properly. And if someone is in a certain lane and they have to change for whatever reason, I have a co-founder, they've vested for a year, they have some equity, but now they just want to be an advisor part-time. We end their vesting, and now they're in the advisor role. Yes, they have more equity than an advisor would, but they had earned that, right? They worked full-time for a certain period of time. But you just want to manage expectations appropriately going forward. Yes, question here.
What kind of vesting schedules do you like to see in these early founders? Do you like that 4-year with a 1-year cliff kind of thing, or?
That's standard. You can play with that a little bit to negotiate. So let's say that you started working with someone and you've worked with them for 6 months or a year, and now they're coming on full time. Some co-founders will negotiate and say, I'll come on, but I want my vesting schedule to start when we met. So you can play with some of those things. I think is totally appropriate. It's same as any compensation. You want to stay within the bounds of reason and work through that. Yeah.
You mentioned that strategic and early hires are often going to take a pay cut to come to the company and compensate that with equity. How many years should they expect to keep that pay cut, and at what point do they need to come up to market in their base salary and not just say, well, I got equity one day?
That's a great question. At this stage, there's no cash in the business typically yet, and so the option is the answer is you start paying people what they're worth before you lose them. And so as you raise capital and you start generating revenue, you want to compensate your best players to keep them around. And some people will move on, right? And I think that's a natural progression. The skill set at this stage may not be a good fit at the Series A stage, et cetera. So I won't say there's like a hard and fast rule, but it's very much down to the nuance of how much is the business willing to pay for this individual to continue to do what they're doing, and how worried are we about losing them. But keeping cash in the business is important for everybody. And so burning cash early on can be a risk. So this is me thinking through as if I were in the entrepreneur's shoes. So let's go to the next one. A good co-founder can change everything. We're going to talk into some of the detail around how you actually find and test this co-founder relationship, that steps that are skipped. So why do you want a co-founder? First Round Capital did a look back at their portfolio companies, and I'm not sure what other data set they had, but they found that teams with 2 or 3 co-founders received 30% more investment. They grew 3 times as fast on a customer standpoint, 25% higher seed valuation, and better performance in terms of investment. So there's reasons for this. And it comes back to, from day 0 to pre-seed and seed, there's very little cash in the business. And so if you are a founder solo and you can't do something, you have to pay someone else to do it. And you don't have the cash to do that. And so this is where speed becomes so paramount. With a co-founder, you can raise $250K, have 9 to 12 months of revenue if you're tightening your belt and doing some of these things, and still have somebody that can both build technology and someone who can sell technology. And there's the difference in the early days of having a co-founder versus not are very much felt. There's great examples of solo co-founders that do extremely well. They tend to be people who are really good at fundraising so they can get cash, or they already had cash that they could invest in the business to kind of skip that valley of death. Or they are superhumans and they happen to have the skill set that perfectly matched what they needed to move fast enough and get through there. This is felt less in later stages, right, as more cash is in the business. And the cash per employee is less extreme, but this really does matter. So what makes a good co-founding team? The skill set should be diverse. Having 2 salespeople, they probably get along really well. They probably, bunked up in college and, knocked doors together all summer. I bet half the people in this room did that. They have mutual friend groups and they play pickleball together on Saturdays, but the skill set's the exact same. And there's an argument to be made that equity at the co-founder level wasn't well spent when you could have spent half of the company to bring in something that you absolutely needed to move faster at that critical stages. So what you do to increase the chances that you find this co-founder is not just talk to people, but actually work with them. And I said this before, if the person you're talking to be your co-founder isn't willing to spend nights and weekends around whatever else they're doing to work with you and determine this, it's hard to know if they're even ready to be an entrepreneur with what you're doing. And so it's a good litmus test to know if they fall in that entrepreneur bucket or if they fall in maybe the strategic hire or early hire bucket. But the more you work with them on design sprints, going on customer calls together, talking to investors together, or building product, those will teach you so much more about the other person than an interview or a coffee chat. So it's hard. The reason why we do this in-person residency with Antler is it increases the likelihood of good co-founder matching dramatically. And we invest in lots of companies where 2 founders show up, they each had their own idea, they meet, they throw both their ideas out the window, they start a new company, and 8 weeks later they have a check from Antler. So finding a good co-founder really changes the speed dramatically. So it's worth spending the time. Things people mess up. They have a weak case for why they're co-founders, part of the company. Why the co-founder's committed for the long term. They give too little equity to someone who is filling the co-founder track that should be there for the long term. Or they give too much equity to, quote, co-founders that aren't there full time or aren't doing that. So it's worth spending the time up front to make sure that you know what track they should be. Advisors or employees who own too much, provide too little, early hires that have titles that exceed their experience. So in the strategic hire thing, just because there's not a CTO doesn't mean your first engineer should be the CTO. the title should actually match their experience. So if they're a full stack engineer, they could be your founding engineer. But until they are actually a CT level of experience, you have to be careful to not give them that title too soon, because it removes your ability to bring in that talent as the startup grows, or allow that employee to grow into that talent. So it's just a red flag about how you're managing your cap table and cash and everything else. CTO also gives a connotation that you're paying them a lot of money, and that can bring challenges. So thinking they can hire for functions too early. The founders at the early stage need to be able to do everything in the business. And you will outsource some things over time, but just watching cash is very important. And then raising capital at too low or too high a valuation. So mismatching where the business, is actually at versus where they're raising on that staircase. Because if you raise it too high of a valuation, it makes it very hard to, the next step on the staircase is that much higher. If you raise too little, then you don't have enough runway to actually get to that next inflection point. So both of those are problems. All right. I'm sure there were questions there about co-founders, but yes, let's hear.
Yeah, so I've seen some companies that do sweat equity, where it's like X amount of input, whether it's like metrics or hours equals a percentage of equity. And so
Yes.
you can see people build into that co-founder equity stage. What are your thoughts on that?
So that is vesting, that's milestone-based vesting. And I think it's totally appropriate to do in the right circumstances. So instead of vesting on a timeline, you vest in milestones. And that's actually really helpful with a co-founder. So one of those milestones could be coming full-time, right? And then you get your first tiny sliver, and then time-based vesting starts after that. You can negotiate that however makes sense, but it is appropriate to do. Just make sure that you all agree on the framework, and that you're thoughtful about both the amount of equity and then what happens if it doesn't work out. What kinds of things do you have to protect the company? And again, it's not you protecting you as the founder per se. You have to protect the company, sometimes even from yourself. Okay, so be thoughtful about that. Yes.
Cash, on that last slide you had, a lot of things that people can mess up. Do you have any frameworks or best practices on each of these, maybe content you've created elsewhere that we could look at later?
So the frameworks where I drew these from are these frameworks. So I would say that these should apply to most of these. I could point back to each of these frameworks for all of these mistakes. But I'm trying to show best practices, and then what I see most often as common mistakes. But things like having the tracks and everything else is super helpful. So let's talk now about wasting time and moving too slowly.
We got one more here. Cash.
Yes.
For advisors, what's a typical time commitment for an advisor?
So advisors are tricky because they charge based off value, not based off of time. Some advisors are going to be worth way more per hour than others, and your rationale for getting an advisor will be different. Some will be for domain expertise, some will be for an individual founder coaching situation. Some will be you maybe are outsourcing a lot of your tech development and you need an advisor to help you manage that relationship and mitigate risks in a certain way. So I would say that that's nuanced enough. I don't think I can answer to the group generally, but just know that an easy way, I'll say this. So I showed the equity that typically advisors get at the pre-seed stage and the seed stage. If you give them cash as well, you dial back the equity, of course. Another way is you just ask them for cash and push them out of the advisor track and into the investor track, and do it at the same terms as other investors, or maybe at slightly favorable terms if you need to bring them in. But that's one way that you can manage that relationship to make sure you're drawing out a lot of value. The difference between advisors and investors is advisors you can vest. And so you can have a forcing mechanism to draw the time out of them. If someone invests and they get preferred shares, that's theirs now. You don't have a recourse or a lever to force them to continue to give you time and resources. So they could give you the cash and walk away. They're incentivized to not to do that, right? They want to see you successful. They've bought a piece of your business, but you as a founder don't have that lever to hold like you do with an advisor relationship. So there's definitely trade-offs between the two. And I found a lot of founders that can raise capital would just raise it from them, bring more cash in the business, have follow-up calls with their investors, even angel investors, to get that coaching or that advisorship. But in general, I just think that founders at this stage are vulnerable to advisors that take too much equity for too little value. Okay. So speed is really important, not only for you as a founder, but for the investors, because it goes without saying that investors only want to invest in the best companies. They don't want to invest in companies that aren't growing. They don't want to invest in you if they don't see movement. And you don't want to waste your time in a company that's not going anywhere. And so speed comes from focusing on the things that matter. One of the things that matters the most is validation and sales at the early stages, even if you don't have a technical co-founder yet. Or if you are the technical co-founder and this isn't your forte, it's still extremely important. And you want to get out of the easy stuff like surveys and into the one-on-one customer discovery calls as fast as possible. Excuse me. You want to get out of the immediate and intermediate level customer discovery and into the hard stuff as fast as possible. And not only do you want to do that, but you want to have a laser focus on the assumptions that you've made about your business. So let's use an example. Superhuman is an email app that I use. Their story is very interesting because how commoditized is an email app? There's 20 of them on the App Store. And Superhuman charges me an incredible amount of money every month so that I can send email on something I could do for free. It's really hard to compete with free, okay? So when we look at Superhuman, what do we have to believe in order for the concept of superhuman email to work? Well, we have to believe that that a customer is so dissatisfied with the current options that they're willing to try something new, and without a trial period. And I'm sure that some of these assumptions were proved far down the line, but they had to prove that email is not just used to send and receive email. They use it for something else that is not being addressed by the current options. So there's these assumptions where you have to roll back and you say, what do I have to believe? And now I'm going to use these tests at each stage to address specific assumptions. You can talk to customers all day long, but if you don't get to the most important question of your business today, you are wasting your time. And so if people do have questions about this and they want to talk about their idea, we could break down some of the assumptions if you want. But in general, just know that it's worth taking the time to write down these assumptions before going into these conversations. On Thursday, Philo Ventures is doing an event just on this, if you want to attend. So when I talk about an insight, this is not, in the case of Superhuman, people hate email. People hate responding to email. People have 100,000 emails in their account that they're not answering. That's not an insight. That's a fact. I could Google it. Everyone knows it. It's not unique. It's not an earned secret. So it's the earned insight that you get as a founder is something you collect from all of the work that you're doing, and you can create a statement that you know is true and you have strong evidence of that not really anyone knows. And in the case of Superhuman, the insight was email is not texting. Email is a way you manage your workflow. It's a way that as email comes in, those are often things that you process. You're processing them as your job, not just a way to communicate. And they built the entire product around how do we make this person that's emailing someone else able to blazingly fast process all of their work from their email. And that comes down to reminders, to responses, to sharing, to everything else. And so think about this earned secret and whether it's, I talked to someone today who has a platform for finding photographers. The earned secrets, there's earned secrets there, so many. Like, what is different about this experience that people don't realize, but once they discover it, it resonates with them. And it's more than the things at the surface level. So the questions there about the distinction between the two. One of the most common things when a founder pitches, it's good, I'll say, so what, if you get asked the question, so what makes you different? Or how does this compare to this other option that I have? It's the earned secret that is not being communicated well. So now talking about, as you're doing customer discovery, it is a sales job at the same time, okay? Founders are not asking enough commitment from their users and their customers early enough in this process, and so they're getting bad information. And they're building for the wrong customers. They're building for the customers that talk the most, not the customers that are willing to pull out their wallets. And so if you can't ask for money yet, ask for their time. If you can't ask for, if they're giving you your time, ask for resources. Have them sign a dotted line that said, I would pay for this. Have them show it to their boss. That's a big ask, right? Ask them to do design partnerships with you. And this is something where founders feel like they get caught in the chicken and the egg problem. And this is the answer. So VCs will say, I want more validation from your customers. And the customers say, sure, go fund this and build it, and then I'll use it, okay? So if you're in that situation, get to the point where you're extracting so much commitment from your customers and you do it in a quantifiable way that you have overwhelming evidence to take to investors that it's real, even if the product isn't built yet. And you need to avoid the mental traps of, oh, I have these 10 people. If I go ask them for money, I might lose them. Well, if you are worried about losing 10 customers for your startup, you have bigger problems, okay? You should be burning through dozens of potential users and customers through this process that will never buy from you down the line again, because you used that experience to learn and you spent it, right? And it just means you have to go find more. So if there's a fear of not having enough of these people to talk to, you have probably deeper problems in your startup, okay? So that, this trap I see a lot. And there's ways to creatively, even asking from your customers what they're willing to do, and then taking it one step beyond what they feel they're comfortable doing and asking it of them, you'd be surprised how often they'll give it to you if they really want it, okay? So I get asked, do LOIs even mean anything? Well, if you tell the customer that it doesn't mean anything, it doesn't. Because you're saying, hey, sign this for my investors, but I'm reducing the level of commitment from you. Just sign it. No, you want as much commitment from them as possible, okay? Even if the legal document doesn't mean anything, the commitment from them does, and it teaches you something as a founder you can't learn otherwise, okay? And as you're going from resources like design partnerships to cash and asking for money and payment, do that sooner, do it months sooner than you think you would. There was a startup I was talking to in New York. They were consultants. They worked with banks to do these processes where public companies go out and get votes from shareholders. So they built a software like, oh, we're doing this with consultants for Fortune 100 companies. We'll build the software for it so they can go out to their shareholders and get these votes. It'll be magical. And they had one design partner. It was the only person they talked to. And they were so confident that they'd built it right because they'd been in the industry for years and years and years. And they're like, oh, well, we can't go and ask them to sign a contract and pay for it till the product's built. And the product would be built 2 months from now. I was like, well, they know what the product's going to look like. You know what the product's going to look like. You've known each other for years. Why not ask them to sign a contract now and just not have it start until it's contingent upon the product being fixed and ready to go and these parameters? Like, ask for the money. If their expectations are there and they intend on paying, just get that commitment. So things that people mess up. They build in a vacuum and they don't sell fast enough. And on the first day of the Antler residency, we say that, and half the room's like, oh yeah, I've done that so much. And then week 2 and 3, all of a sudden everyone's calendars are getting filled up with all these customer discovery calls because they're realizing that they didn't extract enough commitment from everyone along the way. And there were things that they didn't test properly in their assumptions. 2, wasting time on name and brand before you have real validation, real customers. It's hard to build a brand out of a business that is changing every day and you don't know what your customers are willing to pay for. Don't waste time on that. Too much trust in what you knew before you started the company based off past experience. Really dialing back to the core assumptions and proving that with people giving you money. Not asking enough commitment. I really belabored that point. Relying too much on easy forms of discovery. 6 is taking months to get to MVPs. This is actually in a product speed as opposed to like a go-to-market and validation speed. With you will find that some ways of going to product with an MVP are just faster. Writing something on a whiteboard is just faster than doing a mock-up in Figma. And doing a mock-up in Figma is just faster than doing a no-code app. And a no-code app is just faster than going through the process of hiring an engineer or a dev shop and going through this process. So speed is your friend. And don't let the fear of talking and asking commitment from your customers overshadow speed in right instances. Of course, you need to get into good product when the time is right. But some people use, the product's not ready, to make them feel more comfortable waiting to go and ask something real from the people they're talking to. All right, resetting the clock after each pivot. You will pivot a lot. This one I will talk more about in a minute, but when you are sprinting on a startup, it's important to time box yourself and say, well, I had this inflection point at this moment, now we're going this direction. And not getting too trapped in the idea of, I've been working on this for months or for years. You probably haven't been working on it for months or for years. The company you're working for on a year ago is different than the company you're building today. And having that true, fresh mindset of this is how long I've been working on this thing is going to be important not only for how you manage your company and your cash, but also how you talk about your fundraise. So we're going to talk about fundraising now. How are we doing on time?
We're doing great.
Okay.
I have a quick question on number 1 on that last slide.
Yes.
When it comes to selling, I think one of the most difficult challenges for those who don't have a strong sales background, if you're a founder, this idea of founder-led sales, it's hard. And sometimes you may feel like, as a founder, you want to bring in someone else to come and sell for you because you don't feel like you're a good salesperson. There's a transition point when you move from founder-led sales to hiring your first salesperson, and often people feel like, I need a VP of sales rather than just a BDR or a strong salesperson that's not necessarily VP title. Maybe you can help us have a better grasp on that piece.
Yeah, so the founder should be selling. And even after let's say you hire the best salesperson in the world, the best VP of sales you've ever seen, the founder should, the VP of sales still depends on the founder doing at least 50% of the sales they were already doing for it to work, okay? So even if you hire someone to help you with that, the founder has to be in that during the early stages. So some ways you can address it: find a co-founder that's good at sales. But if your co-founder is doing the sales, that means you have to be building product, right? Like that's what matters. And if you feel that you're not good at sales, there are great courses out there that are fairly inexpensive. There's tons of demand for salespeople out there, which means that the access to information to learn this stuff is pretty accessible. Companies are putting it out there, and you're going to learn through pain and suffering and trial and error, just like everything else in your startup. So it's helpful for some founders to start meshing their customer discovery. Maybe like product managers are a perfect example. They love discovery, and they don't realize that with a couple of tweaks, they can also be selling, and that can unlock a lot of things for people in that mindset.
So really quick on the resources you had mentioned for anyone interested in learning more about founder-led sales. I found a really great resource in Gong. Gong, very popular. I'm sure many of you have heard of Gong, but a lot of awesome resources, the really solid, strong stuff, frameworks, templates, and everything. So check out Gong for those sales resources.
Thank you.
Kind of along the lines of that, I was just going to ask for some tools for whether it's sales automating or helping reaching a lot of people, for people who are new to sales. what tools do you have to suggest, or if you know communities that can help collaborate together, tell you guys the new tech that's out there to utilize for sales?
Good question. So at the earliest stages, you're going to be experimenting with a lot. Warm email, cold email, introductions, showing up to events. And you're going to have an extremely low response rate. 1-2%. Just know that's normal. You're not wasting your time. But what that means is when you do get customers that you're talking to, you need to extract as much value out of those as possible. You need to plan ahead of time the things you're proving and everything else so that you're not wasting that time you do have. But if Gong has some good resources, I'm sure I would look at the software tools. They're trying to sell you on the value of the product and test things. So I wish I had more answers to that. I'm looking at some founders in here I know that are good at sales, so you should ask them. But I just see what happens when founders don't do it.
All right, so blood, sweat, and tears for the first couple times. Like, yeah.
Technically forever.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
So.
No, good to know. And then I also had a question about, there was the balance of, the chicken or the egg, or having your product out and not having it, but trying to get as much commitment as possible. That's definitely a big thing about trying to overpromise or being worried about that. So if you're going to take money from someone, but your product's not built, it's really, to me internally, really is hard to justify that. I guess, how do you, without having that experience prior to that, how have you constructed a way to mentally accept that, or to have your justifications behind it, especially since it would have been my first time to create a product for someone?
Yeah, I think that we sometimes, we don't give our customers credit for being smart and knowing what they're risking and giving you money as an entrepreneur. If they just went through a customer discovery process with you or a design partnership and they give you money, they know very well that you could be out of business in a couple months. So the expectation management for later customers is slightly different. But I mean, there are Series A companies that are not cash flow positive that are still going out there and promising a lot of features and a lot of everything else and bringing in customers, and they have 4 months of runway. Okay? So what you do as the founder is make sure you're clear on what you're promising. And if there are specific instances where you say, we're signing this contract, our first payment is here, just make sure that the customer is comfortable with the risk that they're taking, right? You can think of it like they're putting a deposit on you and your product, hoping that the house is built, right? So it is something you have to get comfortable with.
Yeah, so I've got a question kind of tied to point 7, because there's companies and founders that are totally unwilling to pivot. But then there's also, like, in my experience, I ran an events business for a little while, and I made panic pivots. And so, in your opinion, how do you make smart pivots?
So smart pivots are typically done in confidence, not in fear. So you should either stay your course out of confidence or pivot out of confidence. You should not stay your course out of fear of what might happen if you change something, or pivot out of fear that you're going down the wrong path. So it's back to the conversation of customer discovery, where breaking down the tree of this is the business. What do I have to believe to be true for that to work? These assumptions underneath, and start testing those assumptions. If you can't point to the actual underlying supporting assumption around your idea that you're flipping the idea off of, then it feels pulled out of the air. And so, and it also forces you to say, what is the evidence that I'm seeing or feeling, because there is some gut at this level with imperfect information that is making me flip on this assumption. What I used to believe about this idea is now flipped, and how does that make me adjust the top here? So, but I think the answer is you should be able to articulate to your co-founder and your team why you are doing something and what you are basing that off of. And if not, then you can go get more evidence, typically quicker than you think, to push you one way or another. Okay. So the right way to fundraise. I've seen some entrepreneurs that are really, really good at this and some that aren't with great businesses. And it's so tough to see great businesses not get the capital they need because they approach the fundraising process the wrong way. Back to this staircase. If there's one thing that you can take away that every time you think about it, you'll find a new insight as you're building your software company, it's this progression and the impact every time you learn a new term or you're talking to a VC and they say something, putting it to this framework will bring a lot more meaning to what you're doing. So let's look at an example. We go through a period of no outside capital. I find my co-founder. I validate my problem statement. Maybe I'm even getting users. Maybe I'm getting LOIs, and I'm feeling like I have some overwhelming evidence that this is real. I've extracted some good commitment out of people who want this, both from a co-founder and customer standpoint. And I go to market and I raise a $750K pre-seed round. Okay. Notice that I include some dilution here. The $750K that I raised, maybe I raised it at, maybe it's all at the same valuation. Maybe it's a blended valuation of $5 million, because sometimes at the pre-seed round, you take a little bit from this person at this valuation, you kind of step up as you raise it. That's not too uncommon at this stage, less common in later stages. But I diluted 15% of my company. You want to be thoughtful about dilution because you have to leave room on your cap table for the growth down the line, okay? And with that $750K, I have 15 months of runway with myself and my co-founder, maybe one other resource. But I target hitting 35K in MRR in the next 8 months. In B2B SaaS, that could be 5 customers, 10 customers, 20 customers. That feels within reach for a lot of B2B SaaS companies. For other companies like marketplaces, consumer, that revenue number may be different, but then other metrics become really important, like number of users, retention, and some of these things. So just know that I know this is like the SaaS chapter, so I'm kind of modeling it off of that, but there's other metrics that may be meaningful here. This is the ideal scenario because my round's not too big, it's not too small, I'm giving myself the flexibility, and I know that I'm planning to have enough runway to get through this entire flat period and hit the inflection point and still have months left to negotiate. I don't want to have to start going to VCs and negotiating right here before that step. Because now I'm in a position of saying, all I need is your dollars to just get me to this next piece. This is where you hear of extension rounds. That's what an extension round is. And they're hard to raise. They dilute you beyond that 15%, which can be challenging. And it means that you have to negotiate on your back foot. You're saying, I set out to do something, it did not happen, and so I need more runway, but we're right there, right? So you're in a bad negotiating position. So when we talk about the actual strategy of the fundraise, what do you do about fundraising during the flat period? The first and most important thing you do is build product and sell product. The better company you have and the closer you are or beyond that 35K MRR mark, the market size of investors that will talk to you grows, okay? And so don't let up off the gas at all for yourself, even if you're doing well on your goals. If you're doing well on your goals, raise your sights higher. It's only gonna make your life easier as you go into these fundraising conversations. And make sure that it's done fast. This 35K MRR in 8 months, man, I could take that to the best seed investors in the country and you would get a conversation from everyone. You may not get a commitment from everyone, but I could tell you that every seed VC in this state would take a meeting with a startup that's been in business for 6 or 8 months and has 35K in MRR. And that's how you ensure, and that's how you sell to customers even if there's uncertainty about the future of the business. So less than that, you're just shrinking the number of investors that will talk to you. Right. And so you can still raise. There's lots of, and I even hesitate to put some of these like 20 to 50K MRR marks out there. Some people use this as gospel and this changes all the time, right? But I say it simply to say the higher it is, the better off you'll be. And that's the first most important thing. Doing the work ahead of time. So during this flat period, as you're building your company and you're hitting these next inflection points, it is worth taking 5 to 10% of your time as a founder to meet other founders who have raised venture money, and to meet angels, and to meet VCs, and not pitch them. What you're doing is you're getting contact information, and you're getting at least a contact so that you, in a single month, can pull off 75 to 150 conversations, okay? And you want it as close to one another as possible. And the reason for that is, 1, you need reps to get it down. 2, if you don't do that, no investor has an incentive to put money in first, okay? You have to create scarcity yourself, because the investors, they can just wait. You know, another bus passes every 15 minutes, okay? So by having these conversations at once, you're learning faster, and this will become your full-time job as the founder during this 1-month period. Will be all that you do. It will consume everything, okay? Having a co-founder and team in place at that time is really important. But this will help you in creating that scarcity and making the round come together, okay? There's nuances about leads and other things I'm not going to get into now. This is more of just things I see people miss. Next is control the frame of your fundraise. Come with overwhelming evidence around the things that matter, that you can build product, that you can sell product, that customers care. This doesn't always mean more evidence. It just means the right evidence that is convincing, okay? Show you know the game, how is played, that you understand where you're at in this venture staircase, that you're raising the appropriate amount of money at reasonable valuations, diluting the proper amount. Third bullet here, this is something that I've talked to a lot of founders here in the Valley, is talk about your traction in terms of time. I mentioned before you have to reset your clock after you pivot. You should reset your clock after you go full time. You should reset your clock about when you, after past inflection points or after a past raise, so that when you say, we have 35K in MRR, well, is that over 5 years or over 8 months? It's completely different. And so in your traction, being very thoughtful about the story that you're telling, because it changes everything. And you as a founder will go in circles and loops and everything else, but then once you start getting somewhere, you want to snip the most recent relevant information and present that so that it's very clear what you've accomplished and when, okay? Everyone moves slowly till they're forced to make a decision. So use this to your advantage. Use this to your advantage leading up to when you say, I'm raising in February. So everything up until February, you say, oh, I'm not raising right now, but this is what I'm working on. It's really great to meet you. Yeah, I'll keep you posted. So make it casual with these future investors. You don't have to be extremely memorable yet. You just have to be memorable enough to get a meeting when you need it, okay? And then you have to turn the table, force those conversations together to create the urgency. So there's some of those things that people mess up, don't have enough conversations. They don't prep their conversations, and so they're spread out over 6 months or a year. They haven't fixed their cap table and validation issues before going. Number 5, I'll explain that one, chronological narrative versus a strategic one. A chronological narrative is, well, I quit my job, then I did this thing, then I did this thing, then I did this thing, and now I'm at this idea. Throw that all out the window. A strategic narrative is, hey, this is who I am, this is my background. At this point in time, I got this strategic insight. This is how I found it, and this is what's happened since. It's not chronological. It is logically how you got to where you are and what you're doing. And then don't take into account time. So that's all of it. We went through a lot of information. I've never talked for this long ever in my life. Two things. If you have questions, let's ask them. But other than that, it'd be great to hear from 5 or 6 of you things that really helped that you want to apply, just for people who are listening to this later on, that they can kind of capture that. So questions or maybe 5 statements. We could go for 4 minutes. What do you think?
Yeah. And guys, I know that there are other events happening, so if you need to bail.
If you do need to go.
But don't. I'm just kidding. So the reason we wanted Cash to come and join us, I had a conversation with Cash a couple weeks ago, and he shared a lot of this with me, and there was I made so many of these mistakes. And I literally wish that there was like a required class for every entrepreneur who's about to dedicate their life to a really important idea or a business that they believe in. And I wish that they had all of this so that they can avoid so many mistakes. For example, just like prepping those conversations with your fundraise and having kind of condensing it all into one, it gives you momentum. And I've messed that up. And I spread mine across so much time. And it's just like, I wish I had that before. And like, I'm doing my research, guys. I'm using Google and I'm using the internet. Like, I'm reading everything I can find. And it's just one of the things that I missed in my research. And anyway, I would also, as we go through some of these conversations and talk about some of the things that you're experiencing and that you're having challenges with, like every entrepreneur has failures, and so please don't be afraid to be vulnerable in some of the failures that you've experienced, because we learn from each other in this. So,
And I'll say it's not too late to do any of these things.
yeah,
Just restart the clock, fix them, go back out. If you need to throw away the old company name that you never raised money into, there's nothing wrong with relaunching or doing any of those things. So I actually looked at the time. I know that people have to go, so I don't know if we want to do questions or not, if we should just talk casually after your call.
this is kind of one of those things that you guys, again, really, if you've got another event, but for some people, this may be what you're living right now, and this could be the most valuable thing you do all day. All week, all year, maybe, I don't know.
Yes.
So if you want to stick around, let's give it a couple more minutes. But if you do need to go, we're not going to be offended if you bail.
Okay. Questions and thoughts that were helpful? Yeah, right here.
Thank you. One question is, how do you go about issuing stock? Do you recommend becoming a Delaware S Corp? Do you just have it in writing somewhere with that early team? What's the recommendation?
So there's a local group here that's really good that I would recommend called Savvy Legal. They have good thoughts on this that are better than mine. 2 routes. The moment you go to sell shares to investors, you'll need to be a Delaware C Corp. S Corps are more for partnerships and services companies like law firms, those kinds of things. You can start as an LLC, but to give yourself flexibility, maybe you don't know if you want to raise venture money yet, but it's more expensive to convert from an LLC to a C Corp than it is to just do a C Corp. So it just comes with different issues. But don't go to just your regular lawyer. Go to a venture lawyer, startup lawyer that can help you with that.
Thank you.
Okay, question on just like overcoming the you're too early question. I don't know if this is like similar or not. So I am a co-founder of a B2B SaaS company that sells into the HR space, and we get told we don't do HR a lot. Now, is that actually true? Like, I mean, look at some of their portfolios, and they don't have any HR people within their portfolio. Some of them do, but it's been like during the hot season of VC in 2020, 2021.
Yep.
Is that just a you're too early, just disguised as we don't sell into HR and we're doing something wrong? Or how do we overcome that objection when you're not in a sexy space?
Good question. So you cannot trust everything a VC says on why they say or not. They are not incentivized to tell you what the real reason is. And for the rest of the people in the room, this is why. If they tell you why, they're saying no. And you fix it. And you come back. And they still don't invest, they're the bad guy on the block. If they tell you why they didn't invest and you disagree, they're also the bad guy on the block. And so they care about that reputation, and so they essentially just kind of aren't willing to share. So you'll have to read between the lines in some degree. If it comes to stage, if they are a seed Series A fund and you're pre-seed, that's going to be the answer you're going to get most of the time. There are very few institutions that actually do pre-seed, by the way.
Yes, it's really tough.
So count on a lot of your pre-seed money coming from angels or institutions that are taking different bets. Antler is one of the only truly active pre-seed funds where we're writing dozens of checks every year in the U.S. So that's to that point. Now you're saying, okay, my industry. Your unique insight will trump industry every time.
Okay.
If the unique insight is weak, you look like every other HR company out there.
Right.
So the unique insight needs to be something that's compelling enough to say, this isn't really HR tech. It's not doing the same thing as Rippling and all these other companies that have kind of grown. It's doing something that's different, and I appreciate where this could go. And I would imagine it's related to that, why you're getting that question or objection.
Perfect. And then just related to pre-seed in general, how have you seen it done as far as like the mix between angels and actually doing a true pre-seed round? Like, we have a bunch of people with committed capital, but it's like, hey, we have to find a lead. Is there a way around that to like just send them the YC safe form and just say, hey,
Yes.
here's the cap and...
That's why the safe exists.
Okay.
So there's two things. A lot of founders skip pre-seed because it just is such a time suck.
Right.
Okay. And then the other thing is you can do a safe with a cap that makes them feel comfortable, and you can bring that capital in as you go. But again, extracting that commitment from them, the risk for them is that they invest a bridge to nowhere and you don't actually cobble together enough capital to get to that next inflection point. So having a strong case as to why you're confident to get that capital, communicating things like, we're raising 500K, I already have 300K committed, you're part of the 300K, the extra 200K should come along, you know, that can express some confidence that could bring the capital in. Hopefully that's helpful. Yes?
Yeah, so question and a thought. I'll start with a thought. And just to echo what you said about Delaware C Corps, if you're thinking about going to do venture raise, just start with the C Corp. I just converted from LLC to C Corp. I want to blow my brains out. It was the worst experience I have had. It's such a time suck away from the things that I actually want to be working on. To that end, we're about halfway through a pre-seed fund right now. One of the slides you had suggested that one of the reasons an investor may not be pulling the trigger is because they are waiting for that ultimate de-risking before they drop their money into the pot. I strongly suspect I have an investor that I'm working with who is in that camp. What do I do to convince them to get off the ladder or start paying?
Talk to more investors. Make them feel like they're going to lose it if they don't get on the bus. That's the answer. And it's really the lever that you have. So the question is, from their perspective, if this is such a hot deal, why am I the only one looking at it? It's a fair question. So you just take that away. Things change.
Hey, quick question for me. So when you're in the early stage, you're going to have a lot of clients that like you're testing things out and you're not sure what's going to happen, and it's just a lot of testing. And then you get to like later rounds like seed or Series A, and they're like, hey, okay, show me your account-based revenue. Do you put those early customers on that you were just testing because they're paying, so you're going to show them in the P&L? So how do you tell that story? And I know there's cohort analysis, but I'm just curious how you would handle it.
So this is where I said make sure that you're telling the appropriate traction in the appropriate time is really helpful. So you can say timeline ACV, average contract value, is this. At this point in time, we made this adjustment, and this is what it looks like now. You can really prove yourself by saying, we've converted all of these old customers up. And this is another example where going and asking more commitment of your customers can really help. If you promise them that they would have lifetime pricing at something, you know, that's another story. You just kind of put them aside, but just time box your metrics in a way where you're not hiding anything, you're very, very thoughtful, and you say, the reason why we are doing our metrics from this date is because we unlocked a new pricing model that changed the inflection of the business, and guess what? The value of your company went up that day, right? Because you unlocked it, you figured it out. So I think it's totally appropriate to do that.
So with that, do you typically, before you send a data room, do you require a call where you're like, okay, let me tell you the story? Or in your data room, do you just kind of explain the journey and the timeline in the data room?
So your deck and maybe a table of contents could walk someone through your data room in a meaningful way. If you're just dumping your data out of QuickBooks and then handing it over, they can write whatever story they want. You want to control that narrative as much as possible. So take the right data out, format it in a way that allows you to tell the story clearly and doesn't. It's not just about telling the story you want to tell. It's also about reducing the amount of work that the investor has to do, okay? And if they feel like, man, I know this is a good company and it takes me X hours of work. Or I could invest in this company, which is maybe also a good company, but it takes me twice as much work to go through the data room and everything else. I'm going to gravitate towards the one that makes me the most money for the least amount of work. So building your data room properly is super helpful in that. I wouldn't just dump out QuickBooks and hand it over.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cash, I think we got time for one more.
Okay, one more here.
How's it going, Cash?
Good.
If I'm a sales or more business focused founder, and I have a friend who's like a software developer for a good company, how do I pitch it to them? How do I pitch my idea to them in terms of like equity split or like doing the work at first and then maybe like dangling a certain percentage of equity later when they come on full time? How do I convince them or recruit them to like leave their job?
So just upfront, gauge their interest, create a framework together where you say, hey, we're going to work on this together for this amount of time, and then we're going to reevaluate, okay? And some decisions you just punt, and you together agree that you're going to punt those decisions. You don't know how much to offer your equity until you've worked with this person, okay? So don't just be thoughtful about setting up those decision-making points and framework ahead of time and experimenting for a few weeks, and then or a few days or whatever else makes the most sense depending on how much time this person has, and go from there. So you have to take that a step at a time for sure. Thanks everyone for coming. It's been great to be here.